Hello, I'm Dave.
And I'm Rob.
And this is The List Makers, episode 54, if you please, a spin-off podcast from The Doctor Who Show. And this month, our topic is, from listener Zack Forest, Top 5 Wilderness Years Projects, brackets, an important bracket here, non-literature, which, Rob, I'm sure is Zack's way of making sure I don't just take the easy path and rattle on about the new adventures or yourself, the EDAs, for the entire time.
Yes, I think Zack is a listener of ours who knows us well.
Yes, no, absolutely, and that's a very good qualification because it has forced me, I know, to look in some different corners and to plot them all out. Rob, we were both there in the Wilderness Years. I grew up in the Wilderness Years. That's kind of my era of Doctor Who. Those were my teenage years, my prime fan years. So a lot to say, but before I say it, it's your turn to make your list first.
Right. Well, look, I need to say up front, I found this a strange topic in some ways because the Wilderness Years are typified by literature, and to do non-literature is to start pulling from a more shallow pool. And I think my pool is more shallow than yours, Dave, because as you've said, this is your era. You were growing up with it, while I was ignoring all the NAs and MAs in the 90s. And while I was doing that, I was ignoring a lot of other stuff too that was happening in those years. So I have a list, sure, but it felt weird to make as the novels were so important to the era and we're not doing novels. And I think mine will represent a different piece of the Wilderness Years to you, Dave. But enough waffle. Let's give it a go.
Make a list, Rob. Make a list.
In at number 5, I've got Scream of the Shalka. I think this one's such a curiosity. Back before the TV revival, this was the official next step for Doctor Who. Richard E. Grant was the Ninth Doctor. Derek Jacobi was the Master, and Sophie Okonedo was the new companion. You know, it was animated, sure. It was online only, sure. It's very much of its time, which I think is to its detriment now, but it has this cool gothic vibe, and there's potential in there. And then, of course, the RTD revival came along and blew it out of the timeline completely because, you know, we're right on the edge of the Wilderness Years here. I think we're only a couple of years from the show coming back.
Yeah.
But Shalka still is this fascinating glimpse, I think, into the road not taken. It's a weird little time capsule, really. So in at number 5 for a bit of fun.
Nice.
In at number 4, I've got Death Comes to Time. And this one is wild. And we do have a full review of it if you go back to April 2022. I made a note of that. We did it back in April 2022, if anyone wants to check out our thoughts on it. Death Comes to Time is the 7th Doctor and Ace, but turned up to 11 and dropped into a Greek tragedy, basically. It's really less science fiction and more mythology, but somehow it still kind of works. It's deeply weird, but it's also compelling. It came out on the BBC website, this is a couple of years probably before Scream of the Shalka, in a moment where nobody really knew what Doctor Who was or was meant to be anymore. So they just sort of said, you know what, let's just make the Doctor a literal god. You know, so it's messy, but it's ambitious. It is worth diving into. So there's that. In at number 3, I've got The Flood. This is the final 8th Doctor comic strip in Doctor Who magazine. And honestly, what a great way to go out. McGann's Doctor had really become the face of the series at this time in the Wilderness Years, because here we're talking 2004. We're out of the 90s. We're almost up to the show coming back. And this was his grand finale in the comic strip. We've got the Cybermen. We've got great visuals. We've got some absolutely wild ideas that even made it to TV later, like cloaked Cybermen walking around like ghosts, you know, remind you of anything? The Doctor absorbing the time vortex and becoming all-powerful. Does that remind you of anything? Water involved in cyber conversion. Does that remind you of anything? I mean, you start to think, hey, are the TV writers just hacks? Have they just been reading these comic strips and hoping no one noticed? It's huge, and it gives McGann's Doctor this epic send-off that he never got on screen until, of course, we got that 5-minute Night of the Doctor thing. It's a perfect blend of old school and new stuff. It's really cool. In at number 2, I've got The Chimes of Midnight. And this one's an absolute Big Finish banger. The Chimes of Midnight is what I like to think Downton Abbey would be like, A, if I watched Downton Abbey, and B, if it was about hauntings and time loops and things, which I suspect it probably isn't. It's weird, it's deeply unsettling, it's also quite emotional. Paul McGann and India Fisher are just perfect together. This is very early in their run as Doctor and Companion. And this story gives them so much to play with. There's mystery, there's horror, there's sadness. It's one of those stories where the more you listen to it, the deeper it gets. And proper proof, I think, that Big Finish was doing really top-tier Doctor Who before the TV series came back. This would be about 2002, I believe.
Okay.
Also from 2002, also Big Finish, in at number 1 is Spare Parts. I think Spare Parts is a masterpiece. I know I talk about it on the podcast almost as much as Kinder. Folks, it's the origin of the Cybermen on Mondas, but it's told as this slow, creeping tragedy. It's got the body horror you love. And at the centre of it all, the Fifth Doctor and Nyssa are trying to hold back something horrible. I think Mark Platt just absolutely nails it, knocks it out of the park, all the other cliches you can think of. It's Genesis of the Daleks, but for the Cybermen. It's far more emotional than Genesis, though. And it clearly left a mark on New Who in ways we've discussed on the podcast before in different ways. So if you've never heard it, seriously, stop what you're doing. Go and fix that right now. Go and listen to it. It's great.
Wow. Okay, I have a number of top-level comments to make about your list, Rob, but I will start by framing it by making my list next to it.
Mm-hmm.
At number 5, I've got the Tom Baker Years VHS tape.
Nice. Yeah.
Now, in an era before we had documentaries on every DVD release, before we had proper internet to be able to research stuff, before we had the full set of non-fiction books we had with, every minute of every studio thing mapped out and talked about and all the rest of it, we got the Tom Baker Years, which was the first real chance. I mean, before Tom Baker even really gave interviews and did con appearances, this was Tom Baker for 3 hours just talking to us, watching clips from his stories and reacting to them. And sometimes they were really interesting insights into the story. Sometimes it was an insight into Tom Baker and who he fancied. or sometimes he's just gone, I remember none of that, which, whilst amusing, was interesting in and of itself.
Yeah.
And even just some of those wonderful little moments where he's watched a clip and with big eyes and, a joyful look on, I know this one. It was either called Invasion of the Crinoids or the Crinoid Invasion. And and it's just so much fun. It was so easy to watch, but it seems obvious now, but it's a big, big deal when that came out.
Yes, good call.
Number 4, I have got an audio adventure, but not a Big Finish one, because I have got The Paradise of Death.
Wow.
This was a big deal for me, because growing up, John Pertwee was my favourite Doctor, and of course the Brigand Liz Sladen as Sarah Jane Smith are big parts of my childhood. So seeing them all come back in a story written by Barry Letts with Peter Miles and Harold Innocent, and just, all these sort of obvious people, wonderful cast, was a really big deal, and I think that's a really good adventure that holds up well. Barry Letts does a good job at putting together a story that feels like a late Pertwee story. It's got the messaging and the ideas of a late Pertwee story. The Doctor's character is really well done, but it expands beyond the budget limitations of a TV story. It adds in some concepts to make it feel like it was written in the 90s, stuff like virtual reality and that sort of thing. I really enjoyed this story. I listened to it again not that long ago. It held up really well for me. It's hearing that cast brought back together that means something special.
Cool.
At number 3, I've got something that maybe would, again, not feel that special here today, but at the time it did, and that is the VHS release of Sharda!
Yeah, great.
Now, again, we've got 47 different iterations of Sharda now.
We do.
But at the time, we had nothing. We didn't have, as an ordinary everyday fan, you didn't have copies of the script, you didn't have the footage, all the rest of it. So seeing it put together in a way that was not perfect, that had gaps, that were narrated by Tom, but was at least watchable. Yes, the music sounds very like the 80s music, not 70s music. It's got its faults. But we had never seen or heard Sharda before. We got to see as much of it as we could. It was a new adventure. It was lovingly put together. It had the little script book come in the VHS pack, which again just meant you could get it and understand it another way. It was a big deal at the time.
Yeah, definitely.
Number 2. This list would not be complete for me without a representative of the Bill Baggs video collection. And I have picked the Airzone Solution, which, for those who are not familiar, is an independent-made video that really has nothing to do with Doctor Who, other than it stars John Pertwee, Peter Davison, Colin Baker, Sylvester McCoy, and Nicola Bryant. So, let's face it, it's kind of just, Doctor Who without the licence. And it's wonderful seeing all of those actors in it. It's good to see Pertwee being Pertwee. It's good to see Davo and Colin and Sylve in very different roles to their doctors, although there are sometimes echoes of some of them. They are different to their doctors, so you get to see those performances. Nicola Bryant actually gets to act. She actually gets to do something that isn't Perry, which is a really big thing. I think this is the peak of that run of independent video releases from BBV. There's some good things later, like the Probe series and Winterborn and all the rest of it that I liked, but this to me was the peak. I came very close to picking another one, which I'll talk about after I finish my list. Number 1, Shakedown, Return of the Sontarans.
Yeah.
I remember seeing this for the first time at a con in 1994, and this was epic. It stars Sophie Aldred, who was, the next biggest thing to a Doctor you could get at the time. It had Carol Ann Ford. It had from Blake Seven, Jan Chappell and Brian Croucher. It's written by Terrence Dix. The music's by Mark Ayres. It's just a really lovingly made story with Sontarans. Really well done Sontarans. They look great. It's filmed really effectively on the HMS Belfast. I just think this is a great adventure that, for me, in that moment, at the age of 14, was just all the things I wanted. It was Doctor Who-y, it was Blake Seven-y, it was adventure-y. I just love it. I think it holds up now. It's a really strong production. The music's great. I think the look still holds up. Brian Croucher proves he can actually act. It's just wonderful. I love it to bits.
Yeah, fantastic list, Dave.
So, Rob, I said after I heard your list that I had some big high-level concepts, and that is what you said at the start is absolutely right. We have gone to very different parts of the wilderness years. Did
you have anything from the 2000s?
I had nothing from the 2000s.
No.
All of it's from the early to mid-90s.
I had nothing from the 90s.
Yeah. So I had all these things from my teenage years. All these things came out when I was 13, 14, 15. Which it is, of course, that time that I was really diving into the Virgin books, and I've spoken about my love for them and how important they were for my fan development at the time. But I've gone to that part of the wilderness years, the early wilderness years when I was a teenager. You've gone from the later ones where you've drifted away from fandom and you've come back to find all these things happening.
Yeah, well, what's interesting, because I was thinking of this as I was formulating some thoughts while you were talking. I mean, I sort of came back to fandom in 96 for the TVM. I was watching that on the ABC, and then I was buying the EDAs from like 97 onwards. But yeah, it all sort of came together more as the 2000s were hitting. Because I had been away, and I sort of slowly came back into it, and I can sort of see that now from 30,000 feet, that although I was back in 96, it was a very slow burn, and then things really took off in the early 2000s, yeah. Yeah,
whereas for me, I'd been a teenager, been very invested in fandom, and gone through that very typical thing of becoming an adult and getting a car and going to university and worrying about part-time jobs and, chasing people and all that sort of thing. And Doctor Who's dead. Doctor Who's buried. They tried to revive it in 1996. Everybody hated it. It's not coming back, guys. Move on. Get over it. And so, they've done this thing called, with the Schalke Doctor, they've done Death Comes to Time, and I'm like, guys, it's dead. There's a world out there with alcohol and, sex and all that sort of thing. And, why do I want to watch Stephen Fry in a Doctor Who cartoon? Come on. So, very different times of our lives.
Yeah. Whereas I'm 5 years ahead of you, so I'd done all that, and now I was having a swing back towards.
Yes.
Oh, what did I like in childhood? Where are my Masters of the Universe figures? I want to watch Robotech.
Yeah.
I was heading in that direction.
Yeah. So it's really interesting, and look, neither of us have even attempted to balance our list as we normally do. We've just gone for what we know and love. A few runners up I haven't mentioned yet, Rob.
Okay.
You had a DWM cartoon, or comic, I should say. I almost had one, which is Emperor of the Daleks. Nice. I think that's just an epic DWM comic. It's just wonderful. It bridges all the continuity gaps between Revelation of the Daleks and Remembrance of the Daleks, with a bit of Planet of the Daleks thrown in. It's got the 6th and 7th Doctor. It's got Benny. It ties in neatly with the Virgin NA, so it was part of that big universe they were creating at the time. So I love that. I almost put in More Than 30 Years in the TARDIS, the documentary, because, again, we're spoilt for these things now. But seeing all these old members of the cast, Doctors and Companions, talk about and reminisce about the making of Doctor Who and what it means was a big deal at the time. It was an epic documentary. I think it's worthy of a mention, even if it's just as a runner-up. And the one I cheekily wanted to get on there, Rob, was Dalek Attack, the computer game, because I played that for hours and hours and hours and hours when I was a kid. I still know the cheat code to get to Skaro is D5 Gamma Z Alpha. So the problem being, as much as I think it's a really good, fun platform game, other than the fact that, the character is the Doctor and the baddies that shoot at you are Daleks and Ogrons, it's nothing like a Doctor Who story at all.
Yeah.
And when I had that thought, I did think maybe I should go with Destiny of the Doctors, the computer game that is narrated by Anthony Ainley as the Master, and actually does try to sort of be in the vibe and the spirit of a Doctor Who adventure as a computer game. The problem there is it's terrible.
Yeah, it is.
So I didn't think it was worthy. But there was just some of the different paths that I was going down.
Yeah, if we're talking game, I mean, I could have thrown in the Doctor Who pinball machine. I put many hours in on that one. But something that I could have had on my list, and I didn't think of it at the time, and when you said it, I was like, oh, bloody hell, yeah, is Sharda.
Yeah.
Because I don't think, I mean, you've done a good job so far, but I don't think we can really express to people who weren't there at the time what a big deal it was to see Sharda. Because if you'd grown up with the few reference books we had, like Doctor Who A Celebration or whatever, or read Doctor Who magazine, you knew about Sharda. But Sharda was just something you would never see, because they never finished Sharda. It's the lost story.
Yes.
And to actually see it, my brother bought that on VHS, and I did watch it. It felt... naughty is the wrong word. I didn't feel naughty watching it, but it was like I wasn't supposed to be able to see this, but I was seeing it. It was wild. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it absolutely was. I mean, the release of Tomb of the Cybermen was another big deal. Even stuff like the Hartnell and Troughton Years tapes, which had episodes that not many people would have seen, were a big deal. Maybe we need to do a whole episode on the VHS range sometime, Rob.
Yeah. That would be cool.
That could be a good monthly topic. I'll make a note of that. Yeah, so look, I'm with you. There was this real chance to see things that we'd never seen before. I said, Rob, when I listed the Airzone solution at number 2, that there was another one competing with it for that slot from the BBV range.
It was the Zygon one, right?
Oh no, Rob, it wasn't. You randy devil, you. No, it was it was Summoned by Shadows, which of course was the first of the Stranger series, starring Colin Baker as the Stranger and Nicola Bryant as Miss Brown. Subtle there, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. Subtle as a sledgehammer.
Yeah, but these were an independent attempt to make Doctor Who-like stories. They were perhaps the first of something we've seen many iterations of now over the last 30 years, which is can we give Colin and Nicola the stories they deserved? And, we've now seen that it's done in books. We've now seen it's certainly done in Big Finish and all the rest of that. So that was a big thing. These were really interesting adventures. I remember quite enjoying Summoned by Shadows, even if I didn't quite get it at the age of 12. The sequel, More Than a Messiah, I don't remember anything of at all, and I haven't watched it a second time. My only memory is Colin Baker and Sophie Aldred wearing not much clothes in a sort of a cave pool. And,
yes.
And again, at 12, you're still like, whoa, this isn't right.
Yeah.
In Memory Alone, I haven't watched it since it came out. And that was sort of the point where I think a lot of fans were, either we're going to invest in this series and become fans of The Stranger, or we say, you know what, this was a nice curiosity, but I'm not collecting dozens of these things. So thank you, but I'm out. But look, Dylan Rees, our friend of the podcast over at the Too Hot for TV podcast, has talked about a number of these, and he speaks very well of In Memory Alone. I think I do need to check that one out again. But look, I picked the Airzone solution. It is my favourite of them, partly maybe just it's got John Pertwee in it. But whichever one I picked to represent them, I think those BBV independent releases had to be on my list, because they were a big part of that part of the Wilderness years.
Oh, absolutely. And look, I own the first two Strangers on DVD, which I picked up probably a few years after they came out in some sort of sale. So I did have them, and I have watched them, but I didn't put them on my list. But yeah, you're right. That sort of production is important, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, we've tackled that in very different ways. Not only did we not have snaps, we were in whole different galaxies. Let's face it, I was Wilderness Years Part 1 prior to the telly movie. You were Part 2 afterwards.
Yeah, I was New Testament, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, that's interesting, and listeners, again, really interested to find out what you thought of all that, and which part of the Wilderness Years was your part.
Yeah.
But we're definitely hitting the time limit, Rob.
Oh, we have, yep.
So, thank you to Zack Forest for sending that one in. Really appreciate it. A different one for us. We have one here from Justin Florkus, and it is top 5 classic stories shorter than 4 episodes.
Ooh. Okay.
I think that's going to get us talking about some stories that don't get spoken about all that much.
I think it's going to get us some snaps too.
I think it's going to have to get us some snaps, although there'll definitely be some on your list that are not on mine. I know that for a fact. But that's for next month. Mm-hmm. That's for next month. Until then, I've been Dave.
I've been Rob.
We will speak again and make some more lists very soon.
We will. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.